$2.3 billion USD for the Sphere, $4.3 billion USD for Resorts World, $3.7 billion USD for Fontainebleau, $1.75 billion USD for the new stadium built on the ashes of the Tropicana. In just a few years, Las Vegas has bet over $20 billion in a desperate attempt to regain its former glory after the historic shutdown. That bet was promoted as a great revival. But instead of hitting the jackpot of tourists, the city fell into a state of decline. The house always wins. The house always wins. That used to be the immutable law of Las Vegas. But this time, the house lost. Super projects once hailed as miracles, from Elon Musk's tunnels and billion-dollar stadiums to luxury towers, now stand as concrete monuments to failed investments. Las Vegas didn't collapse due to lack of money. This city is in decline because it believes money can replace people's true needs. When costs are pushed to unreasonable levels and the feeling of being squeezed dry reaches its peak, tourists are no longer outraged. They simply don't return. $20 billion have been burned. But the biggest loss for Las Vegas isn't money, but it was the crowds that once gave this city its soul. In today's video, we'll go inside empty hotels, deserted casinos, and unravel why Las Vegas can spend tens of billions of dollars, only to lose its soul in the process. Las Vegas entered the post-pandemic era with a very Vegas choice: bet bigger. Instead of scaling down, optimizing experiences, and returning to the things that once made this city memorable, they chose a flashy, all-out recovery model. Build wonders, bring in shows, attract customers with spectacle, as if all it takes is enough lights and enough sound to bring back the crowds. But the problem is, the years 2024-2025 show that the recovery momentum is no longer linear. Some months in 2025 saw a decrease in the number of visitors compared to the same period last year. It seems the wheels of tourism are no longer turning as smoothly as in their golden age. They're jerky, gasping for air, and weak. In that frenzy, Las Vegas sold the farm and poured over $20 billion into the promise of a spectacular revival. But this gamble didn't just fail. It backfired, with devastating consequences. In the blink of an eye, the number of visitors plummeted. Over 12% of guests, or more than 500,000 people in just 1 month, are refusing to be fleeced by tricks that everyone sees as a trap. $40 just to park for an hour, $20 for a terrible cup of coffee at Starbucks, or $26 for a bottle of Fiji water. Vegas is still bright, but that light now reflects off something that makes people more cautious and alert: bills. The international impact is even more devastating. Canadian tourists alone, a crucial artery accounting for over 20% of the market, have vanished, wiping out $3.66 billion in revenue and scorching 4,300 local jobs under the desert sun. And when a city that lives off tourism loses those lifelines, the consequences are not just about numbers. It lies at the heart of the entire ecosystem's rhythm. So, what turned America's party capital into a ghost town? Let's peel back the layers to find the root cause of the disaster. After the pandemic, a dangerous alliance between Vegas officials and giant corporations hatched a reckless, arrogant plan to build a new Vegas. It's no longer just a gambling town. It must be a global monument to extravagance. From 2020 to 2025, an estimated $20 billion in cash flow will be poured into this daring dream. The advertising ploy sounds like a siren's call luring sailors onto the rocks. Modern luxury plus technology, plus cutting-edge entertainment designed to empty your pockets to the last drop. Major players like MGM Resorts, Caesars Entertainment, Sphere Entertainment Co. They all participate in the betting table. But by 2025, the magic will disappear. The chart line plummeted like freefall. Vegas is currently in a state of freefall. Tourist numbers have plummeted, with hotel occupancy rates now only around 66-68%, even lower than during the global lockdown. While Vegas is empty isn't always true. The signs of a monthly slowdown are real, and they're enough for service workers to feel it clearly. What worries people most isn't a slow season, but whether Vegas is losing the loyalty of the average customer. Because the Vegas economy isn't like New York or LA. It thrives on people coming, spending money, and leaving. As the flow of people fluctuates, the tipping system shifts and non-gaming revenue are the first to be affected. And this is the context for understanding why the story of burning tens of billions of dollars became sensitive. The larger the investment, the more intense the pressure to recoup, and tourists became the point of impact. If a city has to gamble to survive, is it still tourism or urban-level gambling? When customers start to hesitate, what's lost first is money or trust. And that bet was packaged in a slogan that sounded like salvation, but perhaps was a curse. The super project will save Vegas. Vegas rebuilt the future with iconic designs, from mega projects to event infrastructure, with a logic that sounds both simple and dangerous. If guests no longer come for the casinos, they will come for the spectacle. But mega projects have a fundamental drawback. They not only cost money to build, they also create expectations of continuous revenue, while post-COVID tourism tastes are highly fragmented. People don't travel the same way anymore. Some people choose quiet destinations. Some people prioritize saving. Some people only go when they see it as worth it. And in such a world, colossal structures can become a trap. The larger they are, the more they demand to be sustained by colossal bills every day. When revenue doesn't increase proportionally, the system begins to optimize in a direction few people like, increasing surcharges, reducing freebies, and keeping room prices higher than the average person expects. Operators might call this price optimization. Consumers are calling it straight a cash grab. And what they were unhappy about wasn't the high price. It was the feeling of being tricked after they'd already entered the game. Vegas used to sell experiences, but many people say it's selling invoices, adding a few more numbers each day. Of course, it's also not entirely accurate to say Vegas is completely empty. Vegas still has busy periods, especially around major events. But it's precisely this reliance on event spikes that makes everyday experiences feel thin and unstable. Meaning, the city could explode in a few nights and then fall silent for the rest of the days. And what's noteworthy is that when people travel, they're not just buying a service, they're buying the feeling of being welcomed. Mega projects might impress them, but they don't automatically make them want to return. The situation is becoming more serious, because when mega projects start bleeding money, corporations should have taken a loss. But in a blatant act of greed, they push the entire burden onto the tourists. From show tickets, meals, and parking fees to sneaky resort fees, everything gradually increased and then skyrocketed. With each new failure, Vegas patches the holes by adding a few dollars to the customers' bills. By 2025, the average cost of a trip to Vegas will increase by approximately 35 to 40% compared to 2019. Cheap vacations turned into financial traps, which most families wisely avoided. Vegas once sold a beautiful lie. For just a few $100s, anyone could enter the glamorous world. But that promise was broken, replaced by punitive bills and a feeling of betrayal. A bitter Canadian tourist said, "Daring to go to Vegas now is financial self-destruction, like mortgaging your own future." Prices are a ridiculous mockery of true value. Who in their right mind would fall into that trap? No one buys that empty dream anymore, and Vegas is slowly paying the price for its own illusions. How long can a city live on newness before people get tired of the very newness itself? If the core experience weakens, can symbols be replaced? And the two biggest symbols of the future of Vegas, the Sphere and the Vegas Loop, are where promise and reality begin to collide. To better understand the picture, let us take you deep into the failure of two symbols once considered the bright future visions of Vegas: the sphere and the Vegas loop. Sphere is not a rumor. It's a project worth approximately USD 2.3 billion that has been widely reported in the media, and the company itself consistently reports its financial situation quarterly. In its quarterly earnings report, Sphere Entertainment recorded an operating loss of $84.4 million for the quarter ended September 30th, 2025, although this was an improvement compared to the previous year. This number is an official fact, not a feeling. And here, an expensive financial scandal began to come to light after the bright spotlight. Investopedia reported that MSG Networks warned it could go bankrupt if it doesn't refinance its debt. A very strong detail because it directly addresses the concern that hype might be masking risk. When a symbol is sold as the future of entertainment but has to live with financial warnings like that, it's hard to see it as just a wonder. It started to sound like a question. Is this a miracle or a money-burning machine? At the same time, the Vegas loop is associated with the gap between promise and reality. The Boring Company announced the final form, up to 90,000 passengers an hour. This is their official claim, and therefore became something easily scrutinized by the public. These types of technology projects are often sold on faith. The future will be more efficient than the present. But for tourists, the question is brutally simple. Does it make the trip cheaper, easier, and more worthwhile? And this is a crucial turning point. Vegas can erect monuments, but if people feel everything is pay to play to pay off debts, the monuments will become reasons for them to stay away. From a systems perspective, mega projects are not necessarily wrong. The problem lies in how cities and businesses react when mega projects don't generate the expected revenue. They raise fees, creating a chain reaction. If the future is built on debt and expectations, who will truly pay the price? How can a wonder become an emotional burden for consumers? And when these symbols started burning money, the next thing that happened wasn't cuts. It was passing the bill on to tourists. What frustrates tourists the most isn't the listed room price, but rather the system of additional fees: resort fees, parking fees, service charges, and other mandatory charges not included in the initial purchase feeling. This isn't just online lamenting. MGM has increased resort and parking fees at many of its strip properties, which has been noted by the press and the travel industry. For example, Casinos.com reported that MGM increased resort fees for the second time in 2024, with rates of $55 a day at some flagship hotels. The Street also reported on MGM increasing various fees and highlighted the fact that the era of free parking on the Strip has ended in most places. When fees become a revenue structure, visitors begin to feel like they are entering a fee labyrinth, and they will react according to American consumer instinct, cutting demand, changing destinations, or only visiting once and never returning. What makes the story hit home is that it's like everyday life. Hidden fees aren't just in Vegas. They appear in airlines, subscriptions, financial services. Vegas just makes them most obvious. This is also where you can bring in the strong regulatory element of the US. The topic of junk fees has become a major debate about price transparency in many industries, and audiences feel directly affected because they encounter it daily. Cherry picking should be avoided. Some people can still find deals by using loyalty tiers or avoiding weekends. But the core point remains: people don't want to have to learn tricks to be treated fairly. Can you still relax when you have to be bill conscious on vacation? When travel becomes a cost avoidance problem, who will want to return? Fees are just the surface. Behind it is the most fragile thing in the service industry: trust. From 2025, major newspapers began using a more serious language to talk about Las Vegas, no longer just slowing down or losing its appeal, but a disruption. Time describes a bar that is emptier, less tipsy, and a service economy that felt the shock immediately. AP News provided a very specific figure: a decrease of approximately 11% in total tourism and 13% in international visitors in June 2025 compared to the same period. A significant drop in hotel occupancy, and cited various controversial reasons, from high costs to international policies and sentiment. The key point for the audience is, not everyone agrees on the cause. Some people say it's due to fees. Some people say it's due to competition between destinations. Some people say it's due to policy. But the overall result is a feeling that's hard to refute. Vegas is no longer certain. And in tourism, uncertainty is not just an economic state. It's a state of mind. Trust isn't just about price. It's about the feeling of, I understand what I'll be paying. When trust is shaken, customers will shift from excited spending to defensive spending. They still go out, but they do so in a defensive state. They look at the bill as if it were a trap. They chose a less risky location, and they learn to spend less. But what damaged trust in Vegas the most was that it wasn't just eroded by fees. It's also being eroded by something everyone fears in this era: personal data, MGM data breach and cyber attack. Not everyone has experienced hidden fees, but everyone fears data breaches. The Verge reports that MGM has agreed to a $45 million settlement related to 2 breaches in 2019 and a ransomware attack in 2023, affecting the data of 37 million customers and exposing sensitive information. When trust is eroded from 2 directions, fees plus data, Vegas is seen as a system that collects a lot of money but offers little protection to customers. And that's the formula that makes consumers leave the fastest, because people can tolerate paying more, but it's very uncomfortable to feel like an open wallet, and worse, like a customer code to be exploited. Can a travel brand survive if tourists feel they are treated as objects for fees and data collection? How many small fees and minor incidents are enough to turn a trip into a decision never to return? And when trust falters, the first thing to fall isn't the lights. It's the income of those who depend on the flow of visitors. If Sphere is an artificial moon, if Vegas Loop is a technological promise, then service workers are what make this city breathe. And as that breath slows, you can hear it even when the neon lights are still on. Time notes that tipped workers are experiencing reduced hours, lower tips, and a sense of insecurity spreading throughout the service industry as tourism weakens. This isn't the kind of insecurity you read in the newspaper and forget. It's the kind of insecurity where people look at their work schedule like they look at the weather forecast. Will it rain today? Will there be customers tonight? Will there be enough money to pay the bills this week? In a city where the real income of tens of thousands of people depends on the mood of the flow of tourists, every decline in numbers translates into a direct blow to their lives. Some reports indicate a decrease in visitation of approximately 6% in the first half of 2025, with hotel occupancy around 66.7%, mentioned in articles based on LVCVA data. These numbers might sound small if you put them in a report, but if you put it in a bar, a casino, a cleaning area, it's no longer 6%. It's a few $dozen in tips disappearing each shift, a shift cut, and another week of having to get by on credit cards. And as if that wasn't enough, another controversy emerged just as confidence was fragile: F1 Las Vegas. Reports indicate that the estimated economic impact for 2024 is 934 mats, lower than the 1.5 B in 2023, according to Applied Analysis, widely cited in the media. On paper, this is still a huge number. On the poster, this is a victory. But in real life, the question of the local people is very old and very sharp. Where did that money go? The controversial aspect is, while F1 is promoted as an economic boon, many local businesses say they lost revenue due to construction and limited access, creating a feeling that it's an event for the rich, but makes things difficult for ordinary people. A city that was once dependent on the natural flow of pedestrians suddenly found its streets blocked, its paths obstructed, and its routes diverted. And the small shops that lived on chance encounters began to die because there were no more chance encounters. If a tourist city cannot ensure the livelihoods of its workers, who is it serving? Why does an economic success on paper come with a sense of injustice in real life? And when workers leave the industry exhausted, the question is no longer, will customers return? But rather, will Vegas still have enough people to serve them? Vegas is facing a strategic choice. And it's not just about business. It's a question of identity. Should we pursue VIPs with luxury experiences and expensive events, or cater to the masses with transparent pricing and a sense of worth it? This is a crossroads that many tourist cities have faced, but it's more significant for Vegas. Because Vegas doesn't just sell services. Vegas sells a promise. Anyone can walk in and feel like they belong. Data and reporting show that Vegas is not completely collapsing. This city still has its busy periods, and the numbers are enough to say it's not dead yet. But the disruption of 2025 revealed a truth that is often avoided. The middle-class-based tourism model is vulnerable when costs rise and confidence declines. As prices soared and experiences were laden with surcharges, the customer base that once formed the Vegas crowd began to retreat, quietly and without fanfare, simply not returning. If Vegas chooses the path of the majority, it must accept something many businesses don't like: reducing surcharges, increasing price transparency, and offering easy-to-understand all-in pricing. This means doing what many industries in the US are being forced to do due to pressure regarding junk fees. Being upfront from the start so consumers know what they are buying and what they are paying for. For Vegas, this isn't just a price list change. This is changing a deeply ingrained monetization mechanism. The mechanism of slicing experience into dozens of small pieces. Can Vegas be reversed? There are signs they will have to do so, not necessarily because they want to, but because they no longer have an easy choice. As competition among destinations increases, Nashville, Austin, Florida, consumers will choose places that feel less overpriced. And in an era where anyone can compare prices in 30 seconds, a city that lives off tourism can't rely on glitz forever to hide an expensive experience. But the end of this story doesn't necessarily have to be pessimistic. Vegas has reinvented itself many times. It has weathered recessions, cultural shifts, and even the very predictions of its demise. Just this time, what needs to be rebuilt isn't a casino or a stage. It's a fair deal for visitors and workers. A place where one doesn't have to enter with a defensive mindset. A place where worth it isn't just a slogan, but a real feeling. If you've ever been to Vegas and seen it change, share your thoughts. What makes you want to go back? And what makes you not want to pay another visit? Please share your experiences in the comments section below. Las Vegas was once a very American symbol, a place you could go with a few $100s and in one night feel like you were living larger than life. It's not just a casino or a hotel, it was a promise of an explosion, of freedom, of a kind of prosperity that everyone could touch. But it seems that promise is being replaced by something else. A system that increasingly resembles a toll booth and sometimes a machine that burns trust. It's not because Vegas is out of lights, and because that light began to reflect on things people didn't want to see. Fees upon fees, out-of-control prices, grand events with unequal benefits, and a feeling that ordinary people were being pushed out of the story. The scariest thing isn't that Vegas is empty. The scary thing is that Vegas might still be crowded, but in a different way. Crowded out of curiosity, crowded for events, crowded for one-time trips, not as a place people return to, because they feel a sense of belonging. If you've ever been to Vegas and felt it change, or if you've experienced something similar where you live, rising prices, increasing fees, and feeling like you've been turned into a walking wallet, leave a comment. Your story can help others understand that this isn't just a problem for Vegas, but a part of modern America. If this video made you think, please hit like to support the channel, share it with a friend who loved Vegas in its heyday, and subscribe so you don't miss the next investigations into changing icons in America. This video is based on public reports, statistical data, and articles from reputable media sources at the time of production. Some figures and interpretations may change over time as new updates become available. The content in the video is analytical, commentary, and information synthesis, not intended to attack any individual or organization, and should not be considered financial or legal advice.